I think that you can't really begin healing and begin like a spiritual journey without like confronting that relationship with
Yeah.
God. Like there's really just like no way around it. And same with like money and sex too. Like those are three huge things that like affect how we function like every day
Yeah.
and how we feel and all of that. But yeah, it is such a triggering topic, and especially in like the world of social media too, when like we can even get into someone, seeing something and it just like triggers them, right? And then instead of like going within and like looking at that and saying like, why does this word like give me this feeling in my
Mhm.
body? We just like immediately attack someone else and immediately like blast into someone's DMs, or we're like in their comment section. We've touched a couple times on like this revival of dogmatic religion that we're seeing. We've talked a little bit about God, but we've never like dove deep into it.
Mm.
So I think that we should do that today. And the reason is because last week I received a blast of what I would call religious hostility in my
Oh,
in
okay.
my Instagram DMs.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I want to read them. We should probably read them and then we'll just like go into it.
It's important to kind of give maybe a bit of context, because yeah, we have been talking about God and spirituality, specifically on like our Instagram pages a little bit more. And I know that a big reason for me as to why I've been speaking about it is because for the past 2 years, I decided that I really wanted to heal my relationship with God and the masculine, if we want to be more esoteric, and men and authority and the government, just like all these different things. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, such that, we've had a lot of blow up in our society when it comes to government and like enforcing rules and like telling us how to live. And what that did for me, it's like, oh wow, like I actually have a lot of resistance in trusting not only the government and trusting essentially God outside of the government. And for various reasons, I won't get into too many details on that because a lot of it's personal. I don't really feel like going into, but um, it forced me to really go inward and like question my own my own hostility towards religion and my own hostility and resistance around Jesus and like just various like traditions when it comes to like Catholic and Christianity and even like things like Islam and like various other religions. It really forced me to go inward in my own understandings. And it wasn't easy. Like it was a whole 2 year journey. I don't think I will ever be done because I do believe, with any big thing like money, sex, God, like I feel like these are like really, really big um really big constructs in our beings, not only in our psyche, but also in our body, because it gets passed down through epigenetics, like in our bloodline, our lineages. Like my mother, she was a high school dropout. I think she ended up having a kid when she was 18 anyways, and my older sister, and then she had three girls, a boy, and she didn't really, go to college, she didn't really do much. And she's just always been kind of at the mercy of the men that she's with, and I witnessed that. And it's also just in my bloodline. Like I'm the first in my own lineage that I'm aware of that, went to college. Like I got my computer science degree. I'm the first in my lineage to have like a healthy, happy family that's not like chaotic. It's really stable. Like I feel like my son is in a really, really good place. I put like a lot of intention in creating stability in his life, in my life, and also having, just like a really loving relationship. Yeah, so that was just like a really big first and construct in like my body mind and my own psyche, my own consciousness, if you will. And what I noticed is that there was just like there was still something else in me, because I've also obviously done, as we know, like I'm a somatic sexologist and I've gone really deep in my sexuality, did a lot of work with money, but there was just still something. Like there was just still something more. And I realized that spirituality and just like a higher power outside of myself is just something that is like viscerally known in my body. And anytime someone would like say the name like God or like use the word universe even, or just, just speak about religion or their God, like, oh my God, just like these like different things that people say, my body would have a reaction. And because of the depth of work that I've personally done, I'm like, oh, okay, there's something here for me. And that kind of is what started it. And why I continuously speak about God, because it has been a really profound transformation for me to question what that is for me, to develop a relationship to that, even to like having a relationship with prayer. Because I find that when we really connect to this, this essence, this spirit, if you will, of God, of the creator, it really only becomes a bit more clear when we're in silence, when we're in our own solitude, or when we're alone. Because you can be in a crowd and like not even a crowd, but you can just be like talking to someone like you and I like right now. Like, yeah, sure, I'll still like feel because I've gone there with myself. I can still feel, there's that beautiful presence that's in the room with us that's so supportive. Um, but it's so different when you actually take that time to like go inward and like question that and create that relationship for yourself.
Yeah, I like that you brought up like money, sex, God, because I feel like those three relationships are like the deepest relationships that you can like begin to heal. And I think that's why they're so triggering too, right? This is exactly why I had this like blast of religious hostility
Yeah.
in my DMs, is because it is such a triggering subject. Um, and I think for me, like I grew up in a very like small town, town of 1,000 people. There was like 8 churches in a town of 1,000 people. So there
Oh
was,
wow.
yeah, there was like a lot of like religion and like different churches too. And there was a lot of like religion around. I was never in it really. Like I went to church a couple times with like a friend just because like she was going, you just like go with
Yeah.
them, whatever. I never liked the, um, constructs of it. Like I felt like very closed in by it. It just never resonated with me personally. And then throughout my teenager years, I was just like, yeah, like absolutely not interested in like learning about God, learning about any of that at all. And even to this day, still someone when people like bring up God, I'm just like, ugh, like the word,
Yeah.
like just because there's so much like I guess I don't know if you want to say history or like intention or like whatever comes with that word from being so deeply ingrained in like society and really in us as we grow up. Um and now I think that you can't really begin healing and begin like a spiritual journey without like confronting that relationship with
Yeah.
God. Like there's really just like no way around it. And same with like money and sex too. Like those are three huge things that like affect how we function like every day
Yeah.
and how we feel and all of that. But yeah, it is such a triggering topic, and especially in like the world of social media too, when like, we can even get into someone, seeing something and it just like triggers them, right? And then instead of like going within and like looking at that and saying like, why does this word like give me this feeling in my
Mhm.
body, we just like immediately attack someone else and immediately like blast into someone's DMs, or we're like in their comment section. And it really is such a like an unproductive way to communicate. And I mean, we see this all the time on social media, but it really doesn't do anything. Like when someone gets in my DMs with like this religious jargon, it doesn't change the way I think. It doesn't change anything that they think. It's just we're just like butting heads, and it's just kind of a pointless communication process, I think.
Well, yeah, like going through triggers, I feel like is one of the things every single human being really needs to have awareness around and understand what a trigger is. So, a trigger, if anyone that isn't aware of that, a trigger would be feeling a sensation in your body when something is uncomfortable. So, for example, if you're driving in your car and someone cuts you off and you immediately want to flip them off, you're essentially triggered by that person and you're in a reactive state. So now you're acting out of reactivity rather than your authenticity. And this happens for so many things hundreds of times a day, I feel, for a lot of people. For me too. Like I used to be an incredibly reactive person and I still can be. Um However, it is like it's a muscle. I say it's a lot for so many different things that we talk about. It is a muscle. So when we are feeling upset, when we read something or we see something and someone's doing something that we don't agree with, and for whatever reason we're angry, and what happens if we happen to be in a dysregulated nervous system state? So if we're already stressed out, if we've already had a really hard day, if we had a little sleep, or this specific thing that this person's talking about actually is like a deeply rooted belief or value, and it hits like a core wound, or just it really hits us at an emotional level, that trigger, that sensation will feel like too much in our body. And then we end up throwing it all, I call it hot potato. We end up hot potatoing all of our emotions onto somebody and just dumping, like, whether it be, anger or even sadness. Some people be like just like oversharing, and like that in itself can be a coping mechanism rather than just being with the sensation of, the experience that you're having. And the reason why this is so important to have this awareness with, because you can imagine if you're with someone that you care about, or even just a stranger, if you're talking to somebody and you're having a reaction to something that they're doing, it could be as something as simple as them saying they like the color blue and you fucking hate the color blue. So you're like, oh, that is fucking gross. I can't believe you love the color blue. And you know what? Maybe that really offends them, and it's not coming from a place of like protecting people from them being offended. It's just literally being aware of the sensation of the feeling that you're having, and just developing a deeper relationship with your own body and being okay with feeling big emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to be like super reactive myself. I have literally done the exact same thing that was like done to me like a couple years ago during like the COVID years. A friend of mine like posted something in her stories. I was triggered and I like shot into her DMs and literally ruined a friendship. I'm not kidding you. And so I've been that person. I've been on both sides.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, you learn from it because once you calm down, like once your nervous system calms down, you immediately recognize you're just like, oh fuck, like that was not cool. Like I was in the wrong on that one. But
Well, most people do.
okay, yeah, I should say not everyone. Sometimes, and maybe, and you know what? It could even take like later that day, a week, a year later,
Yeah.
whatever it takes. But yeah, for the most part, people do. And then once you realize that, you're just like, oof, like that is not a good feeling to know that you just like basically dumped all your like anger onto somebody else or whatever. So I've been on both sides of it, and neither side, like when you're coming from a place of a trigger, it's not nice to receive, and it's not enjoyable to like throw at anybody else either. And I don't think anybody ever leaves that situation like feeling good. You're like, oh, that was a good conversation.
No, and what I find really funny about this is that the people that are like maybe either don't admit to it, or I don't know, for whatever reason they don't feel bad about it later. For whatever reason, in my like from my ex, I've been that person too, and I've also been in very abusive relationships where they would repeatedly abuse me, like physically. And some people really need to numb themselves and disassociate from that part of them, where it makes it easier for them to deal with that. And I don't know why we're going here right now, but that can be incredibly dangerous for them, because now they're just completely not connected to their body. They're numbing themselves, so they're going to be even more volatile, they're going to be even more reactive. And reactive people are simply dangerous people, in my opinion. They don't create safe spaces, they don't make for great lovers. they, they also yeah, they just become trolls on the internet.
Yeah. And it doesn't, like, yeah, like I said earlier, it doesn't solve any problems. And I said, I've been this person, I've been the one in the comment section, I've been the one in the DMs. And at some point, like, if you reflect on that, you're doing nothing. Like, you're not getting your point across, you're not solving problems, you're not convincing anyone of your points. It's literally just feeding into this, like, cycle of just, like, toxic bullshit.
Yeah. And that's what I say too, like, because anyone that does that, they're acting out of reactive state, and reactivity begets reactivity. So you are almost you almost want that person to react to you, because that's really, unless that person's like conscious and actively like choosing to be more of a conscious, loving person, then you're only going to get reactivity back. And that's, I've seen it countless times. Like because of mirror neurons, our literal nervous systems will pull that out of people. So do we want to read the comment?
Yep.
So we Kasey received a comment on Instagram, I believe it was, very recently, because of a lot of the stuff that we're posting about God and spirituality. And this is kind of what triggered our own response to this. Rather than, being reactive in the comment section, we're deciding to extract just whatever lessons that we feel might be supportive to anyone, and just be more transparent with our community and our audience.
So it starts with, this concept of personal divinity is just conflating your ego to replicate a narcissist. You embrace a personality disorder where you lose genuine empathy and only tolerate that which affirms your ego. It's building your own echo chamber, your own positive feedback loop that will send you way off base into some cult-like cause. Demonic spirits will always tempt you to glorify yourself. They will always push you to give yourself over to pleasure and push you into the hands of other narcissistic, self-seeking individuals to take advantage of your body and mind. The devil will always push you to glorify yourself, to sleep around and fuck yourself silly every chance you get, to chase a euphoric state and make soul ties with as many people as possible because it breaks you down as an individual. It's bondage at its core. You won't believe me, you will reject me now, but when you feel hollow and alone, maybe the one true God will speak to you and you'll see the error of your ways. True peace is achieved through repentance and submission to Christ. You won't find peace until you find the truth of it. This is why demonic forces always push you to glorify yourself. It takes your heart posture the furthest away from the truth and your salvation.
Well, this is why I had religious trauma years and years ago.
When I think of like religious fanatics or people that are really really far off into that side, this is exactly what I think of. And it's unfortunate because it does give like a bad name to people who aren't like that, right? It's people who are religious or they go to church or whatever. And they just do their thing and they just believe what they believe and they accept that other people believe things differently, and like that's totally fine. And I think there has been a lot of religion has done some good things too, right? Like it's not black and white, it's of course nuance, and there have been a lot of people that have been like saved by it or improved their life through it, which is like great. But then we get things like this, which is just like, whoa, like so far off the deep end that it just leaves such a bad taste in your mouth when you think of God and when you think of religion.
Well, yeah, it has that essence of my way is the right way.
Yeah.
And it makes it incredibly black and white, which we know this world is in technicolor. Like there's nothing about this world that is black and white. Yes, there's truth, and that I think is like the undercurrent of the point of fanatics is like, oh, the truth, the truth. And yes, but this world is an and world. It's and and and. When you have that black and white thinking, like it just creates a box that just cannot hold the truth in its own entirety.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about that before too, and like putting yourself inside of a box or having other people try and like put you inside of a box. And that's what I feel like a lot of this is. It's like trying to fit yourself into like one thing. And I feel like over the past couple years, like I've mentioned this before too, everyone's searching for something, right? The times that we're in are super uncertain, and we're kind of just like floating in this like realm of instability. We're kind of watching our systems like political and medical and financial kind of like crumble around us. And so everyone's searching for something because there's that like that deep-seated fear. And instead of just being able to sit in kind of like the uncertainty of it and say like, okay, things are changing. We can, take this as an opportunity to create something new with it or build something new. People will like go back to kind of the old, right? Because it's familiar. So that's where, like, I think a lot of what we're seeing is this like revival of religion is like going back to that because it's been around for 1,000 years and people want something familiar and it's been done before. And then they just kind of like go off the deep end with it because there is like that fear there of like the uncertainty and instability that's going on.
Well, yeah, anytime you make a decision out of fear, it only creates more fear. That is the problem. So if someone is consistently seeking for stability and certainty, it's going to be like you're creating a house of cards, is it's all out of fear. And when push comes to shove, it's gonna burst into flames because you're gonna be like, oh my god, like what is this? Like I'm now, living a life that I fucking hate. I now am in a cult. I'm now
Oh my god, how did I get here?
how did I get here? Like because like looking for that stability out of fear because you have that lens, right? So it is a slippery slope.
And yeah, so when people who kind of really go off into this deep end, they come across something, whether it's online or in life or whatever, that like pokes at that belief or like makes them question that belief, they go into that like that trigger state, because in order to question that belief, it would start to have them questioning all of their beliefs and their entire identity as a whole. And once you start to question your entire belief system and your identities, like everything starts to come apart. It's like you start to pull one thread and the whole thing starts to fall apart, which is why I think it is such a triggering subject for a lot of people, because it is ingrained so deeply in you and in your belief system.
Yeah, another piece that I was kind of hearing in that message is the thing that I found that, the traditional religion has really ingrained in so many humans in their body mind, like literally in their consciousness and in their soma in their body, is that sex and pleasure is like dirty or it's a sin or it's wrong. And it creates this like Puritan culture where, love and light, demons and the darkness and this and that. And yeah, I mean, there is evil out there. There totally is. But from my experience, it it was created inside of a human. Like it's our own demons and our own shadows and our own unintegrated parts that we end up perverting and like creating perversions in this world and violence and aggression and rape and all these other things. So it's like the more we push that away, the darker that actually gets. And I just find that religion, that is just the things that I've seen and I've learned in my own pursuit with Catholic and Christianity, and then healing those parts of myself in my sexuality and with God, is that the more we ignore those parts within ourselves and the more we push that away and make it seem like it's separate on us and like we could, oh, I would never do that, I'm evil, just like, oh, and then we have a thought, or we obsess and watch Netflix with like psychopaths and those sorts of things. Like, why do you think you're watching that? Like, that lives inside of us. And even the more perverted things that we don't even want to voice out loud, like these are things that live inside of ourselves. And the more we continue to like act as like, we're this innocent, which we are, but at the same time, we have the demons. Yeah, and what you resist persists. Carl Jung has a really, really powerful quote. It's like you will, I can't remember the exact, I'm so awful with quotes when I try to recall them, but it's like, so Carl Jung has a famous quote where it's like, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So really what I see this everywhere in my own life where, anytime I'm like, oh yeah, that's not me. Oh yeah, I this and that, or like whatever. I'm just denying things that are happening in my life, like self-sabotaging behaviors. Like I'm denying like, I don't know, there's so many things I can't even think of them right now, but just like denying these little things. And specifically when it comes to my pleasure, anytime I've denied the fact that, I might be attracted to someone, literally telling me like, oh yeah, no, I don't, but I can feel that attraction in my body. You know what happens? It gets worse. And then the thoughts become destructive. And then you start shaming yourself. And now you're in a like quite literally in a lower consciousness because you're sitting in this soupiness of like shame and hate and like, nah, I don't, da da da, and just unworthiness. And it just festers and it grows inside of you. And then you end up for some reason following people that look like that, and like doing all these little subtle transgressions that now you're completely unaware of because you're in a lower consciousness. So you're denying parts of yourself. So literally your awareness is narrowed. You do not have eyes on your life anymore.
Yeah.
So things happen in your life that you quite literally have created, and you'll deny it and be like, oh no, this is just how life is. Oh no, this is fate. Like just shit like that. And it all stems from, I could have just been like, oh no, I actually find that person attractive. Admit it. And you know what actually happens when you do that kind of shit? It goes away.
I love that you brought up Carl Jung because I've been like diving into his work recently. And one of the recent discoveries that I had was exactly like what you're just talking about. And it was the shadow part of me that was like a manipulator. A manipulator and someone who liked to exert power over people. And this was, I remember being like this when I used to work in the corporate world, right? I was like a supervisor, I had employees that worked under me. And I remember this aspect of myself used to come out and I'd be like, whoa, like that's bad. That's bad. Like push it away. Don't do that. That's bad. And like you said, it keeps coming back. And then it'll also get worse too. And I remember as soon as I acknowledged that part of myself and admitted it and started to look for like the wound behind it, because this idea for me of like exerting power over other people, or almost like poking at them, like trying to hurt them, was I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me kind of thing. And then once I was able to acknowledge that within myself, and like it just integrated and it went away, because you're not repressing it, because anytime we repress anything, like you said, it's just going to keep coming back and back and back.
It's not only just the integration, but it leads to that. But there's also another layer of like, okay, now that I actually have eyes on this manipulator or this sacred slut that's inside of me, now that I have eyes on this part of me, now when it comes to maybe a more of a dangerous place or an inappropriate or like whatever, like maybe you're in a monogamous relationship, like, oh yeah, no, that is a boundary we're not crossing. Or maybe you're at work and you're like, oh no, that's actually my boss and I need to, have respect that as well. Now that you have the awareness of this manipulator, this sacred slut, now you can like, oh, I can see this is happening right now. I'm going to choose differently. So now you literally have opened your eye. And this is like a big thing in like quote unquote spiritual concepts where you have your third eye and you open your eye. This is a big piece of it. You're having that awareness and intuition and all these other things on yourself, but you can't develop that when you deny what's really happening in your body, what's really happening in your mind, what's really happening in the soupiness that is you. Yeah. And then the other piece is like desire. Like desire has gotten such a negative rep, again, mostly because of religion telling you that your desires are sinful and dirty and wrong and yada, yada, yada. This story is old as time. And if you actually do the research on when this disconnection with sexuality started to happen in our culture from religion, this is like thousands of years ago, when around the time when like more of the mainstream like scriptures were created. I can't remember the exact one it was or the dates. We can always look this up later, but when this stuff was happening in the Catholic Church, there was a huge integration with empire at that time. The empire, in the Roman Empire, which was all about controlling society. Kind of similar to what's going on right now. Like the things that happen in our world, they're not new. Like if you ever look back in history, you can see like these are just like waves of lessons that our whole world is meant to like, okay, we didn't learn it 3,000 years ago, so we're doing it again, guys. We have these things that keep happening, and it happened at a macro and even in our micro lives. Like this is why we have patterns, small and big scale. But back then, because of the Roman Empire, they injected all these like beliefs and they split human from their sexuality, which they know, and we have now are coming to remember again how powerful our sexuality is, because it gives us bodily autonomy. We remember that we actually can experience pleasure. We don't need to purchase it from somewhere. We don't need to surrender ourselves to a church. yes, submit to God, but it's not to, a man that wrote something and told us how to do it.
Yeah, I think the big theme around religion is that, like, what I see is that God is this external punitive force. So,
Yes,
like, if you do this wrong, God will punish you.
exactly.
If you don't act in the way that the church tells you have to act, God is going to punish you. You're going to go to hell, right? And that's like a big, I mean, that's fear right there, right? That
Exactly.
is just like the cesspool of fear that's just kind of simmering there. Um, and in my experience, like that never made sense to me. I never, even when I went to church with a friend when I was really young and kind of heard that concept, I was like, it does not feel right in my body. Like there's
Same.
this theory here is not it for me. And then as I've gotten, more into like spirituality, meditation, psychedelics and stuff, and then actually like developing that connection with God inside, um, I've never experienced anything other than like love and support and, just there's never been a negative feeling that I've experienced and like, oh, like God's mad at me or something. It's always, even in my like darkest moments where I'm just like, fuck you, God, like I'm pissed off or whatever, it's always just been like a loving, supportive, like it's okay kind of feeling.
Yeah, exactly. In my opinion, that's the distortion of empire. Like the Roman Empire, thousand years ago, that was the narrative because they wanted to enforce control in a way that they could, cr- have control over society at that point in that era. And it's just carried over for thousands of years. And now because it's been so long, it is like I keep saying, it's literally in our soma, it's in our blood, it's in our bones. And this is why money, sex, God is so important for humans to just really be with and learn what that means for them individually rather than going with something that's just always been the way and not actually having, a deeper relationship with it.
And the part in the original post that person on Instagram is what I think triggered them was this part in the post that talked about their divinity. So like your
Mm,
divinity or like my divinity. And what that means to me is really just like the connection to God within you. It's
mhm.
not, to me it's not like I am God. It's just like my divinity within is just like the connection to God within. But when you have the view that God is this like external force, to have a connection to God within is the trigger point, right? Because they're like,
It's foreign.
no, yeah, exactly. Because they're like, no, like God is out there, and I am like an inherently sinful like human that must like submit and be punished by God if I'm bad. And that's like where that trigger point came from, I think, anyway, in the original post, what this person responded to.
Yeah, and for me, like a big piece about journeying this relationship with God, it really has been understanding that, yeah, God isn't punishing me. That was a really huge, and it still is really hard. Like I don't want to brush over the fact of how the last 2 years, how wild it's been to really untangle and create a relationship with God. Um, especially, feeling the unconditional love that is there, the support that's there. Knowing that I don't actually, I'm not all on my own. Like that is a really, really huge thing. And a big piece of that has been healing my own relationship with my father and the masculine, specifically my father though. Um, because of I think we've talked about this before, but because of this like dynamic of how our body relates to our physical father, the one that brought like, that physical father, our body mind relates to it in a very similar way to, the creator God, this essence that we have in this world. And that has been huge for me. Really and hard, like really, really hard. Um, because like yeah, my father was an alcoholic, he wasn't there, and then I had an abusive stepfather, which was not nice to myself, my mom, and like any of us, even though he kind of was just like there, like he was still there. So it's yeah, really having to heal that part of myself and realizing like, oh my God, there is this like father essence, this God consciousness that just fucking loves and cherishes me just because. And I don't like, even in my desire, even in my sexual longing, God is still like, yes, yes, rather than, like, no.
Yeah, no, I hold the belief that we really get, sent to earth or whatever. We incarnate here to experience life to like the fullest, right? And like that means joy, pleasure, like pain, everything. So, I'm not well versed in this realm, but like why would we be given this ability to have sexual desire or sexual pleasure if it was bad or if we weren't supposed to experience it, right?
Yeah, and I guess like a big piece of it is like people like, oh, what look at the world then, like although the kids, like this shit that's happening in the world, and like yes, yes, I totally sympathize, and yes, I see that as fucking horrible. We can't not have a discussion about desire without feeling into those aspects and seeing what's happening in this world. And in my opinion, that is like, again, money, sex, God. Like, this is one of those big things that humans really need to develop a relationship with, because desire can be fucking evil. Desire can hurt people. And the more we ignore the elephant in the room, the deeper and darker and more insistent and persistent it will be. And this is like obviously a big piece of my work. When people come to me, I help them develop healthy, loving relationships with their desire, with their sexual hunger. And I've seen people, that have had the longing for things that are fucking wrong and dark and horrible get to a place of love, acceptance, and actually integrating and healing that and no longer feeling that way anymore. So yes, yes, there's fucking evil, and it kind of lives in us.
I think a big aspect too, like maybe we should touch on like shame as well, because I don't think we've mentioned shame yet. But when you hold shame within you, like you just think of yourself as like inherently bad, sinful, dirty. And yeah, you do get these thoughts and feelings come up and you just like shame yourself for it and you make yourself feel really horrible. And shame is actually one of like the lowest vibrational emotions you can have.
Get that emotional scale. It's like the most darkest,
Yeah.
densest. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the one that I find when we're speaking of like religion specifically is like it's right down there with fear, right? There's so much fear, fear of God, and be ashamed of yourself, be ashamed of your desire, be ashamed of your body. Like there's just so much shame there. And that's one of the hardest ones to heal as well because it's so deeply embedded in us and it's so confronting and hard to bring up.
Yeah, and the biggest reason why shame can be the most difficult to quote unquote heal is because you can't do it alone, which is the irony of it. It's like shame usually comes from an external, right? And then you learn it all, and then you end up doing it to yourself. But shame can only be healed when it's seen. So if we have shame around our body, or we have sexual shame, or whatever the shame may be, we've been shamed because of the God, the word, whatever, right? The thing that's going to heal it is being witnessed in that. So if you're someone that is ashamed of your body, maybe you have a scar or whatever, the thing that's going to help, that's going to, I don't want to say heal, because heal doesn't feel like the right word. The thing that's going to alchemize shame is literally going in the mirror, looking at your body, feeling the discomfort of whatever the fuck that shame brings up, and learning to love that shame. Like fucking love the scar, love the thing, da 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 da. And a layer to this is letting someone see you in that. Like I think that's like a big thing, because that's a big piece of my work, is like being witness. Like being witness is what heals shame. So whether you're witnessing it yourself or letting someone witness you. Another layer is that if you have sexual shame, right? You have shame around a specific desire. You're like, it's going to be really fucking hard to get past that without admitting that it's there. So that is the aspect of seeing it. So whether it being like admitting it to yourself, or having a sexuality practitioner, or like your lover in these aspects, in these worlds, can be really helpful. I'll be like, hey, like, I actually desire this person, but I still love you. That immediately can kill the charge from that shame that it has around that desire, and it just fizzles out. I've seen this happen hundreds of times now with myself too.
I'm like, I have a question because I'm thinking of like, you always do this. You always like bring up like personal experiences for me. And I'm like, now I want to ask you. So I'm thinking of like a personal experience, but do you think then like doing group work, whether it's like psychedelic ceremony, whether it's like group breath work or whatever, and having other people like witness that emotional release or whatever it is that comes up is more healing than doing it on your own?
Yes and no. I think there's nuance. Like, I don't want to do the whole black and white thinking, the whole thing that we're trying to get out of, but it is like 100 times more powerful. Like, absolutely, you can do a lot of this. So like there's another thing that I do like with a lot of clients. It's called the I see practice, and you're literally just looking in the mirror, you're looking in your eye, and you're saying I see, and you're just going to say what you see about yourself. And what you're seeing isn't like, oh, I see your hair is brown. Oh, I see your eyes are blue. It's not just that. It's like, I see sadness. I see that, just like, what is it you actually see, but like beyond, skillfully, what are you seeing? And this cuts through so much fucking BS because you're actually allowing yourself to see it. So there's a way to do that on your own. But when you have like in a group dynamic, when you have like 8 people, 15 people, 100 people, depending on what it is, all those eyes on you that are seeing, the thing that you're bringing forward to be alchemized, like, it is fucking potent. Like, it can get like a lot deeper than your one person seeing could possibly do. And sometimes people can see you in a way that you can't see yourself.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because I'm just thinking in my mind about like the dynamics that I have when I run Cambo groups versus when I run like private sessions. And I love the energy when I have a group. Like, it's so powerful. And for people to be able to like release whatever comes up, whether it's like a physical purge or whether like there's somebody sitting there crying and everyone is just sitting there and you're just like in it together, and it is just makes it so much more powerful, is what I've noticed as a practitioner. And then in myself, my most powerful Cambo session that I ever had was down in the jungle, and there was maybe 8 people sitting there watching me, and I just had like this huge emotional release, like sobbing, crying. And I just felt in that moment like so supported and so accepted and just like completely okay to like have this experience in front of these other people. And that was like to this day the most powerful one I've ever had. And I do think that part of it was because I was in a group of like supportive people who not only were there to witness that experience, but then afterwards were there to, ask you about it, be like, hey, like, what did you feel, what came up, and then you can talk about it.
Yeah, well, that's huge because if you think about it, however many people are, that's how many nervous systems are there to hold whatever's there with you. Especially if they are supportive and loving, they're a bit more regulated than someone that's sitting in fear and shame, right? So their nervous system is literally supporting yours. I think we forget, we human, because we're looking externally, we forget how connected we really are at a somatic level with our bodies. Like, so much communication is not spoken, right? Like, when you walk into a room and you feel a vibe, like, yeah. So the same idea when you're in a camo session or the group dynamic or just a group with anybody. If there's a group of supported people, you can feel that. Like, that is tangible. Yeah. And what I love about you bringing that up is that, in my experience, being in group settings like that, it is training your nervous system to feel safe, not only in group settings, but just in life, aka God. So it is another way that our nervous system, even though we're not consciously thinking about it, Our nervous system is like, oh, this world is safe. Oh, I am safe and supported. Oh, yeah, there's people in this world. And that can be transferred into our own spiritual bodies of that, oh my God, like, yeah, God is here. God is safe. God is with me, with these people as well. That's what I've felt in situations like that. Yeah. And I honestly love religion. Like, I really, really do. My only like crunchiness, and maybe even it's just lack of trust in it, is because of over the years the amount of pain, even like the pedophilia that's happened in like the Catholic Church, like all of these things. Exactly, all of these huge things that have happened that, the church, quote unquote, I'm not gonna say religion, but the church has kind of been like entangled with. And from my experience, it has, like you mentioned it, like it has been stemming from this ideology that God is separate from you. And the only way you can feel connected to God is in a church. And if you behave a certain way and you do a certain thing and you say the right things, like you have to be like this perfect person. And the God that I've developed a relationship with is unconditional, loves you even in the face of hardship, in suffering. Even when you fuck up, you're still held and supported. And in my experience, in having that understanding and rewiring in my body, the relationships in my life have all improved. I'm not in like I'm not suffering the way I was like a decade ago when I actually was atheist for a long part of my life because of this stuff. And I went harder into like a specific kind of spirituality, with like crystals and like
Yeah, the
tarot
crystals. Everyone
cards
goes
and
through that
like,
phase.
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think those are like little gateways into, just going inward. Because we still have that understanding that divinity and beauty is outside of us. And as we start finding these little things that, like, oh yeah, that allow us to create some kind of spiritual relationship, and then we start doing, because that's the gateway, we start dabbling into more real stuff, like, understanding what's going on inside of our body, feeling feelings, feeling sensations, being open and honest and truthful and authentic and less reactive and more responsive and living in loving way, right? And also not rejecting our desire and our pleasure and really owning that and developing like a relationship with that. um we start to look more inward. We bring our eyes in, so to speak, and we stop blaming. We start holding ourselves accountable. We start being a bit more responsible. And when I started to do that, I started to relate to God in that way, ironically. And it forced me to want to have a relationship rather than saying like, oh, just the church gets God. Oh, like, no, like I'm allowed to have my own relationship with that. And I think that was a huge permission slip for me. That started a really beautiful relationship.
I like that you brought up too, like how your relationships with other people now are a lot better too, since doing that.
Oh my God, yes.
Because it brings me back to like a part of this message where this person sent me, where it's like when you realize that you're hollow and alone, and I'm like,
Oh, right.
and it kind of like just makes me laugh, because when I didn't have, when I wasn't into like spirituality and building that relationship with God, that's when I was hollow and alone, right? Previously, when I wasn't going within and finding that connection within myself, that was where that came from. And now that I have like moved more into that space, now I'm, not hollow and alone anymore. Now I've never felt like I've had more people in my life that are like aligned with me. I've never felt more like I can communicate with people better and like express myself, and that's come through, I think, just like building that relationship within me and not seeing God and the church as like this like external, like kind of fear mongery, like shameful,
Yeah.
system
Yeah.
essentially.
Basically telling me that the things that I want in life or the things that I feel are wrong. So for anyone listening, I I know this is a lot about God, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. I totally understand that. I've been there as atheist for a portion of my life. And I'm not telling you to go to church this Sunday, today, or whenever you listen to this. But what I would love to invite people into is just a different relationship with God. One that maybe doesn't involve the church, or maybe it does. Like, 'cause I actually really love listening to worship music. That's a guilty
Yeah,
pleasure of mine.
Christian rap. You
Yeah.
got me on the
Oh my
Christian
God,
rap.
I cannot. Like, my favorite thing is twerking to Christian rap. So if I burn in hell, oh my God. Anyways, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I just really want to invite people into a different relationship with God, one that only you can have, one that I can't even tell you what would look like, because the relationship that I have with God is going to be different for you than that it is for me, that is for Kasey, that it is even for people that are triggered by this. Like, it is going to be so different. So the invitation is to maybe turn down the lights, light a candle, maybe pray for the first time in a long time, and just maybe focus on your heart and set an intention, and maybe even just ask God for a sign, and just allow yourself to be open and curious to what happens after.